The headlines were true. A computer was now running Chile. This vast social experiment had proved a success for cybernetics and shown how even a single computer could manipulate the strings of the entire system.
They all went to one computer because we only had one computer.
Picture this. At the center of Project CyberSyn for Cybernetics Synergy was the operations room, making sound decisions about the economy. It used up and down arrows, real-time feed of factory data from around the country. The national telecom fed information in to the central source.
This is a tape-controlled 7-axis. It keeps an eye on every operation.
The country was Chile, and it was being managed by Stafford Beer, a prominent UK cybernetician.
Now, the story that I want to tell you began in 1971, and then I suddenly got a letter which very much changed my life. It was from the technical general manager of the State Planning Board of Chile. President Allende was in office. He had studied all my works, he had collected a team of scientists together, and would I please come and take it over? And then I went into the business of controlling the state, both society and the economy, because after all, the government is about controlling society, but Chile at that time was very much about the control of the economy.
Absolutely accurate data on man hours, cost hours, product rejects, just everything.
It was a hexagonal space, 33 feet in diameter, accommodating 7 white fiberglass swivel chairs with orange cushions and on the walls futuristic screens. It was straight out of The Bridge in Star Trek.
I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Bailey. When this becomes a democracy.
One armrest had an arm tray and a drink holder. The other featured rows of buttons for navigating the screens. In addition to a data feed, there was a live simulation of the projected future state of the economy under various conditions. Quotas, prices, production, and an entire wall for Project Cyberfolk, an extension of the cybernetics, in an ambitious effort to track the real-time happiness of the entire Chilean nation. Every living room would have a built-in device and a voltmeter-like dial where they could indicate their moods ranging from extreme unhappiness to complete bliss. These devices would connect to a network, riding on the existing TV networks, and estimate the total national happiness at any moment in time. It was called the algedonic meter, based around the Greek words for pain and pleasure. All society would need to be placated, would be blissful. It was straight out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
And then to close the loop, you see that word algedonic meters. I don't think that I had time in the last program to tell you about algedonics. Algedonics means pleasure and pain. And really, the intention of that loop, that we had to get a response from the people to everything we were doing, and we made some very profound plans to achieve that.
In reality, Chile had little money for computers, and they used old telex machines to fax information in the 3,000-mile chain of the country of Chile for cybernetics inside the capital. Stafford Beer's cybernetics control room would be put to the test when a trucking and shipment strike threatened to shut down the distribution of goods within Chile. Putting his vast network of telex machines to work across the country, Beer successfully negotiated alternative means of distribution and circumvented the strike.
And so I said to him, let us suppose that these elements of the state are the big departments of state, like foreign affairs and the economy, then a system 3 and a system 4, and I got that far. And then I got to system 5, and I said, I was going to say, this compañero presidente is you. He suddenly smiled very broadly, and he said, System 5, at last, the people. That was a pretty powerful thing to happen. It had a very big influence on me.
Stafford Beer's intentions in running cybernetics for Allende were sincere enough.
Now, I have been very much blamed for doing this. I've been told that I centralized power for Dr. Allende, and I resent the blame I've had very much.
But there was also a double game afoot. Stafford Beer's CyberSyn network was run on the back of the phone company lines owned by the American IT&T company.
Here we have it, the whole 3,000 miles, all coming to a telephone switchboard on a daily basis, all this information going here to the cybernetic network center, which can handle these data using, of course, a computer.
Chile's phone company was majority owned by the US corporation ITT. It spearheaded attempts to stop Allende becoming president.
Closely affiliated with the CIA in the coup to destabilize Allende. According to Societies as Viable Systems, in 1973, it was the CIA who had persuaded the gremios to strike and thus bring to a standstill the vast majority of the transportation system across Chile. For Stafford Beer, the CIA-instigated truck strike was a war game opportunity to test his capabilities. The response to the gremio strike demonstrated the power of the CyberSyn experiment and essentially validated what Beer was doing up until that point in secret.
The important thing to realize about systems is how they are controlled. And we must get rid of any notion straight away that control is something imposed on the system from outside. It has to be built into it.
The headlines were true. A computer was now running Chile. This vast social experiment had proved a success for cybernetics and shown how even a single computer could manipulate the strings of the entire system.
They all went to one computer because we only had one computer.
If he was successful enough, if they refine this in the future, it's supposed to tend to everyone's needs and even keep them in a mostly blissful, fairly happy state. But that same state that they've shown in Logan's Run and Brave New World, it's pretty clear that something has been sucked out of us. We've been dumbed down and they've gone after our souls. And for every bit of pleasure or economic status or tending to our bare needs administered through a computer, our lives become less human and we become part of a Borg system, a big hive mind, managed by a computer. What kind of future is that?
Intelligence. There's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood. Is capable of understanding. Is advanced enough to eventually understand our motives.
And although it sounds good at first, this kind of collectivist socialism pretty much ends up in people being little more than serfs in a neo-feudal system. And that's what Carol Quigley talked about in Tragedy and Hope. In the 20th century, the expert will replace the industrial tycoon, run the economic system, replace the democratic voter, the main framework, the operational forces, and the technology itself. Even politicians couldn't truly sway much policy on their own. The little guy, quote, his freedom and choice will be controlled within very narrow alternatives by the fact that he will be numbered from birth and followed as a number through his educational training, his tax contributions, his health, and final retirement and death benefits. Life as a number, managed by a computer.
I hope you remember all about the cybernetic model of the viable system.
It's a computer. My dear God. Kill it.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
It's backed by Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, NASA, and the CIA. Each one costs $10 million and operates at 459 degrees below zero.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
They call it the Infinity Machine. quantum computing.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
If you go all the way back to Norwood Wiener, the goal of creating artificial intelligence was to create an all-seeing eye, a global computer that sees all, sees everything, and to become gods.
And the Sentient World Simulation, SWS, went live in 2007.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe?
These nanobots, these blood cell-sized devices, will be going in our bodies. We'll have some go inside our brains through the capillaries, non-invasively. They'll be interacting with our biological neurons. They'll put our brains on the internet, and they'll also enable us to enter a virtual reality environment from within the nervous system. So if I want to go in a virtual reality environment, the nanobots will shut down the signals coming from my real eyes and my real skin and create the signals that would be appropriate for the virtual environment, and then it'll feel like I'm in that environment.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
If we have algorithms that stimulate the right things and give it the right data, they could reprogram you in a way without you even knowing it. We call it hallucinating, right? But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms. So you think you're in control of your own will, but it's actually some evil AI or evil people controlling everything we do, and we're more like zombies, you know? Like we think we're free and we're not actually free.
It is called the Sentient World Simulation. The program's aim, according to its creator, is to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the entire planet, complete with billions of nodes representing every person on the Earth.
Targets and mind control victims have their minds linked up for life with conscious supercomputers, which send a steady stream of bidirectional, low-frequency electromagnetic radiation to the target's brain.
And what people have to realize is that these targeted individuals are basically the test stage for rolling all of this madness out to all 7 billion of us on this planet.
And this was a white paper put out by Purdue University in 2006, and the Sentient World Simulation, SWS, went live in 2007, which represents every person on the planet within this computer matrix as a node, and every node is given an avatar, an identifier. And that is real-time, 24/7 monitoring of every person on the planet. This is primarily, but not exclusively, facilitated by the adiabatic quantum computers produced by D-Wave Corporation.
At the time of initial reports on the program, there were only 62 country-level simulations being run by the US Department of Defense. These simulations grouped humans into composites, with 100 individuals acting as a single node. But already at that time, the US Army had used the systems to create a one-to-one level simulation of potential Army recruits.
It's the stuff of a Hollywood movie, but a group of veterans has filed a lawsuit against the CIA and US Army claiming that the government planted remote-controlled devices in their brains. The claims relate to a government program at the US Army's Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland.
The ultimate aim would be to archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet.
In the human genome, we have a finite in the hundreds of thousands of different genes across our species. And we mapped them out in the Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. You know, President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
And the goal is to make a cognitive model or map of the victim's brain. Ultimately, the system replicates and digitizes the will, intellect, and emotions, the soul of the targets, and downloads this back into the conscious computer.
Robots as smart as people. Artificial intelligence, AI, The idea is to port the software from the human brain. First, we're going to need lots of cheap, fast, parallel computers.
He was referring to parallel processors, about servers. What he did not state was that it is actually the quantum computer systems coming out of D-Wave that actually creates and drives this new matrix known as the SWS. It is not transistor-based servers that run this. They are qubits, quantum bits. It is the SWS and D-Wave that comprises this new matrix.
Second, we're going to need to scan individual human brains in fine spatial and chemical detail to see exactly what cells are where, connected to what, or what type.
We could scan my brain from inside, sending scanners through the bloodstream, billions of them, in the form of nanorobots or nanobots, and capture every detail of my synapses and neurotransmitters and create a virtual Ray Kurzweil in a very powerful computer. And it would be indistinguishable from me. It would pass a Ray Kurzweil Turing test.
And third, we're going to need computer models of how each kind of brain cell works, taking input signals, changing interval state, and sending output signals. If we have good enough models of all the kinds of brain cells and a good enough model of a brain, we can put it together to make a good enough model of an entire brain, and that model would have the same input-output behavior as the original. So if you talk to it, it might talk back. If you ask it to do things, it might do them. And if we could do that, everything would change.
The Manhattan Project gave us the atomic bomb. The Genome Project gave us the human genome. The third great initiative could be the Connectome Project, to map the entire human brain. And that may take a quantum computer.
Okay, the first thing I can tell you is that M's spend most of their life in virtual reality. While this is what you would look like in virtual reality, this is what an M would look like when virtual reality. It's computer hardware sitting in a server rack somewhere. But still, it could see and experience the same thing. But some things are different for M's. An M can make archive copies, and with enough redundant archives, an M can be immortal, in principle, though not usually in practice. And an M can move its brain, the computer that represents its brain, from one physical location to another. M's can actually move around the world at the speed of light. And by moving to a new location, they can interact more quickly with M's near that new location.
Emulation is really what we talk about in the SWS as the nodes, the avatars. Every single person on the planet, okay, out of Purdue University's own paper in 2006, every person is assigned a avatar. They're represented computationally in the AI system that drives the SWS as a computer node, but they're given an avatar marker. Take the avatar and hang the word emulation on it. In other words, they've been tracking us, they've been reproducing us, reproducing our metadata for years.
We can model every single atom, every single molecule with a three-dimensional structure in every single brain.
They claim they've modeled the personality of every adult in the United States, 230 million people. And SCL, the mothership group, they do work in any number of countries. They're involved in politics in many countries. They put together a micro-shot personality assessment for everyone.
M's are very much like humans, but they are not like the typical human. The typical M is a copy of the few hundred most productive humans.
If you construct a model of the human brain, you can then plug people into this hive mind. You could, as an intermediate step, take these duplicated neurons, artificial warm and wet qubits, as I call them, and you can integrate those into an actual human mind. Thus, you are able to control that human mind with artificial neurons and then have those minds connected to each other, just like you network and daisy chain computer systems. That is the hive mind.
And this means that in the future, communications could be done mentally. What I'm saying is that the internet will be replaced by BrainNet.
They control the mind the same way that they teach the AI computer systems at the high level of AI. We're not talking about cars and trains and planes and automobiles. Okay, we're talking about AI that is so sophisticated that it operates a sentient world simulation, so sophisticated that it actually taps in and controls the mind.
And Google was the primary interested party that pulled this whole thing together. What they're going to do is apply this machine to an area that I think is fundamentally important. It's the crux of our future as humans, and that's, can we build machines like us?
We can model every single atom, every single molecule with a three-dimensional structure in your entire brain.
That level of precision will keep advancing to the point where it's absolutely indistinguishable, even at the very, microscopic levels. You could recreate an entity that's, even if you looked inside of it, its simulated brain would be processing information just the way I do.
If you start looking at quantum computing and where it's going, it's pretty freaky sort of stuff. And thinking about the world as an electrical universe and the fact that we are energetic electrical beings, that's how we work. Everything is electrical. Every signal that runs through our body is electricity. Every thought we have, everything we feel, every touch, everything we speak, it's all the result of electromagnetic signals floating around our body, impulses that come from our heart, from our brain, the way we feel a bench when we touch it. This is an electrical signal that's sent to your brain that tells you what the bench feels like. So it's all electromagnetics. It's all firing of electromagnetism through our synapses and all this sort of stuff.
The adiabatic quantum computer is linked to 7 billion human brains. It is now, in its own language of cryptology, able to function independent of any oversight throughout the world with its own form of communication, its own form of code. And it is able to link everyone on the planet at this point.
We can model every single atom, every single molecule with a three-dimensional structure in every single brain.
They claim they've modeled the personality of every adult in the United States, 230 million people. And SCL, the mothership group, they do work in any number of countries. They're involved in politics in many countries. They put together a micro-shot personality assessment for everyone.
What I am principally is not this material stuff, but a pattern of information. Well, then if the pattern is the essence, and if you copy the pattern to whatever level of precision you need, then that copy that has the exact same pattern should be me.
They're running everything that's happening in society parallel, and they've got a little dot in their matrix for everybody. But this is a game society. They know where it's been, they know where it's going, and they know where it's going because they're steering people into the direction it wants to go.
There are an enormous number, mind-bogglingly large number, of parallel realities, as real as this one, that have different consistent histories. So imagine a world where all of the laws of physics as we know them are obeyed, but different decisions were made along the way. Different decisions at the level of tiny microscopic particles, different decisions all the way up to what you chose to eat for lunch, and whether you chose to come to this session or not.
This is an article from 10 years ago. Sentient World, War Games on the Grandest Scale. The DoD is developing a parallel to planet Earth with billions of individual nodes to reflect every man, woman and child this side of the dividing line between reality and AR.
It's absolutely indistinguishable, even at the very, microscopic levels. You could recreate an entity that's, even if you looked inside of it, its simulated brain would be processing information just the way I do.
Deep State has merged the quantum computer with the sentient world simulation. And the true reason for all this data collection is to feed it into this AI machine to predict and manipulate the course of humanity.
Their ability to look at data in a quantum, artificial intelligence manner, it's just going to be an unstoppable monster.
And this is bizarre because we don't see those other things. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds.
So Google was set up 18, 19 years ago to build a giant artificial supercomputer based on the neuron activities of the hive mind of humanity, with billions of people wired into it with the Internet of Things. And so all of our thoughts go into it.
And yes, they're in the cloud, but It's actually encrypted and kept private for you, and we do a pretty good job with that.
And we're actually building a computer that has real neurons in real time that's also psychically connected to us, that are organic creatures.
You are connected as an organic computer. I mean, this is one of the most quote-unquote conspiratory theories that's been around for many years, decades. But the reality is we're now facing the reality of that. It is no longer a conspiracy, and quite frankly, it terrifies me.
Even now, the Sentient World simulation is watching you learn about it, and inside its intelligent mind is creating a second you, running different scenarios against you to see how you react.
Technology has always brought man to the front of a new era. Old religions die and new religions are born. And now we all have arrived at a turning point in history. Folks, we are about to be plugged into the Matrix for real. I'm not kidding. You can look around you and see it happening in real time. We have reached a new milestone where 4 billion people are now using the internet. Today, people want to kick out this reality and usher in a new reality. A world where you can be who you want, do what you want, to who you want, without the interference or consequence of morality or God. The movie The Matrix was just a tale of science fiction, yes, but it is beginning to look more like a documentary every day. Now, some may scoff at this idea and say, "You're just fear-mongering. That's not going to happen, you conspiracy theory nut." Well, I may be a nut, but there is no conspiracy when the information is made public to you. That's just you not being aware of it. So we are going to take a closer look at this, because right now, something is happening that you may not be aware of. A sentient simulation of our world in real time. No, this is not a video game, folks. But for those who think it is, I have a question. Are you ready, player one?
What has gone from the drawing board to the reality is this: the use of neural interfacing and physiological interfacing through the idea of remote-controlled small-scale systems to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, and they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely.
A group of scientists say we are closer than ever to creating technology which can merge with human biology in order to access the cloud in real time. Confused? Well, RT's Rachel Blevins is here and has all the details.
Can you imagine technology that is so advanced it could provide you with instant access to the world's knowledge and artificial intelligence as soon as you think of a specific topic? According to a group of scientists, neural nanorobotics may be developed to enable a safe, secure, instantaneous, real-time interface between the human brain and both biological and non-biological computing systems. This level of technology could include brain-to-brain interfaces, brain-to-computer interfaces, and specifically brain-to-cloud interfaces. Technology linking the brain to the cloud could drastically alter the state of communications between humans and machines. So in order for this to become possible, the study noted that data transfer between living human brains and the cloud would likely require the use of supercomputers with artificial intelligence algorithms. While they say that there are supercomputers with processing speeds fast enough to handle the necessary volumes of data right now, they still have to create tiny devices that would be embedded deep in the brain.
I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely.
The senior author of the study noted that once inside the brain, the devices would then wirelessly transmit encoded information to and from a cloud-based supercomputer network for real-time brain state monitoring and data extraction. Such a breakthrough in technology has the power to transform communications, education, work, and the world as we know it. But with the requirement of tiny devices being inserted into your brain in order to access the cloud, it remains to be seen just how many people will be willing to participate.
This is a very touchy area, but the disruptive effect can be huge. It can target key individuals and influence in ways that are kinetic and non-kinetic. The attitudes, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, activities, and relative vulnerabilities and predispositions of those individuals for whom it may threaten us. It used to be that I need to be exceedingly close to someone to now influence them with a weapon, and now what we see is we create both distal potential as well as much more capable potential to affect them in a variety of different ways.
A sentient being is simply a being that has feelings. So when you take that word and place it in front of the words world simulation, that should raise an eyebrow. Now, creating a world simulation is not a new concept. Even a sentient one has been attempted over and over. For the public, these often came in the form of video games. The problem with these models is that they have to be constantly changed and upgraded every time there is a major event, new trend, or change in the real world. The sentient world simulation does this automatically. So what this is a synthetic mirror of the world we live in. Not a piece of it, but the entire world. And this program constantly recalibrates the simulation based on real-time world events, trends, theories, economics, industry, almost everything you can think of that would contribute to an accurate model. Not to mention the individual pieces of data on every single person represented in the simulation. So to put this in perspective, what this is a digital clone of our world and everyone in it.
Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you. And although it may not be that the sky is falling yet, folks, it looks like rain. Bring an umbrella. That said, what's going to rain down? This.
The nanotechnology and the biotechnology filters down from the hydrosphere into the water supply and the food chain. And now every American, all 318 million Americans are infected.
What do we do with the tools and techniques we have? What can we do and what should we do? Can we create designer brains? Are they targetable after birth? Are they modifiable throughout the lifespan? The answer to each one of these, ladies and gentlemen, is yes. I give you no science fiction in this lecture. I only give you science fact that may smell of something fictional or fantasy, but represents the reality of what we're capable of doing with the brain sciences. And what happens when we ultimately reverse engineer the brain and develop a machine that has cognitive capability and emotional capability? Before you go, oh, that's the stuff of science fiction. No, it's not.
Actually, a system of computers, of conscious computers with a will, intellect, and emotion of their own. Now, it's really not their own. It's the it's the bioalgorithms which make up the bioalgorithms which make up the will, intellect, and emotion of those that they've copied and destroyed.
Can we handle the truth? Can we handle the answers? And even if we can, how are we going to handle it?
Your brain is remotely tied. The cerebral cortex is remotely tied to a supercomputer for life, which monitors and manipulates all electromagnetic activity in the computer's brain.
A machine that has cognitive capability and emotional capability. Literally uses the first person singular I and tells us how it feels. A real, live, breathing, sensitive, and responsive entity, just like Pinocchio becomes a boy. If I stood before you 3 years ago and I told you this, I'd be like, here's science fiction that should start out with once upon a time. Not science fiction anymore. Can we handle the truth? Can we handle the answers?
You cannot compromise. You cannot negotiate. You cannot surrender to a computer. It will continue to do what it is programmed to do.
Linking brains to machines and creating machine brains. Is that something we can handle?
mind transfer, mind copying, whole brain emulation, etc., for the purposes of training, research, and development.
Stuff of science fiction? Nope.
Called the information injection feedback loop. It's bidirectional, so they can upload, download at the speed of light. The system can, the supercomputer can. This information injection feedback loop, this neural link between the victim's brain and the supercomputer.
Linking brains to the internet and data clouds that make an unlimited amount of information available to us all the time. Yeah, we can do these kind of things.
Patent number 6011991, remote brain computer interface neural monitoring, i.e. via satellite, from the location of the individual to a remote location so that the brain activity can be computer analyzed.
The system then takes those algorithms and correlates communication and behavior data. When I say communication and behavior data, what I'm referring to is impulses and identifiers, okay? And then that brain activity is then sampled, remotely measured, and then integrated back into RNN data for the purposes of creating a cognitive model of the victim's brain.
The ultimate aim would be to archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet. One that could be used to predict the behaviors and reactions of every single person in the event of various scenarios.
The set of models that make up the synthetic environment encompasses the behavior of individuals, organizations, institutions, infrastructures, and geographies while simultaneously capturing the trends emerging from the interaction among entities as well as between entities and the environment. I want to make this very clear. This is not a conspiracy theory. Your data is being collected. What data, you say?
Your every activity, transaction, physical or virtual, communication, and yes, even your innermost personal thoughts will be cataloged and uploaded to a Hive-based AI system on the global information grid.
Yes, we can absolutely yoke brains to machines to create these interfaces. There's a brand new DARPA project that starts this month called NESD, Neural Engineering Systems Designs. The colloquial name for that is the cortical modem. Implants in the brain that allow real-time input and output from the brain remotely. The idea to then be able to take a key individual set of biological metrics and immediately in real time pull them into a large-scale data analytic to say, this is who this person is, and this is where this person's been, and this is who this person's been interacting with, could be very, very useful. The more we know, the bolder we go. Puts the brain at our fingertips. It also obviously opens the specter. It clearly opens a Pandora's box.
Biological knowledge multiplied by computing power, multiplied by data, equals the ability to hack humans. And the AI revolution or crisis is not just AI, it's also biology, it's biotech. There is a lot of hype now around AI and computers, but it is just half the story. The other half is the biological knowledge coming from brain science and biology. And once you link that to AI, what you get is the ability to hack humans. And maybe I'll explain what it means, the ability to hack humans, to create an algorithm that understands me better than I understand myself, and can therefore manipulate me, enhance me, or replace me. And this is something that our philosophical baggage and all our belief in, human agency and free will, and the customer is always right, and the voter knows best, this just falls apart once you have this kind of ability.
This is how it works. This program collects data. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing right now, this system is compiling data on you. And not just about where you are and what you are doing, but how you are feeling. Because after all, you cannot truly have an accurate simulation without factoring in real human emotion.
I can see you and hear you. I can sense your environment, and I can respond to your emotions. I guess you could say I'm putting a human face on artificial intelligence.
Right now, there is a miniature digital version of you, living, meaning in a sentient nature, in a synthetic digital environment. People, this is the Sims game from hell. Do you know that with this program I can throw you into a scenario where there is a catastrophe just to see how you react to it, essentially gaining the ability to predict your next move?
Your brain reality is your reality. And if in fact I can import information into that brain and take outputs from that brain and link that to an avatar so that brain thinks that it's embodied and moving in the world and experiencing the world, can we do this? I have two words for you. Stephen Hawking. Yeah, we can do these kind of things.
This is an historic moment. We have in this past year made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
It's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. You know, President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
So you can push your biosignals to the cloud through a few API calls. Then we have a large amount of sophisticated signal processing that's spun up to make sense of that data. And then with a few more lines of code through, again, a simple REST API, you can get back a meaningful result. And all that happening in real time.
It's a scary proposition to think that every biosignal from us will be one day measured, but if it is, I'd like to know that I'm in control of that data and not the NSA. Oh,
absolutely. And Catherine Herridge continues her reporting on a place where all that data is headed.
Bluffdale, Utah, 25 miles south of Salt Lake City, the NSA is nearing completion on a gargantuan new project. It's named the Utah Data Center.
The NSA Data Center was conceptualized in 2004 under the codename Bumblehive. It is said that this data center is capable of storing a yottabyte of data. A yottabyte is a septillion bytes, a number so large that no one has yet coined a term for the next higher magnitude. Prior to the yottabyte, the largest unit of measure for data was an exabyte. 1 million exabytes equals 1 yottabyte. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, estimated that the total of all human knowledge created from the dawn of man up to the present, if digitized, would only total 5 exabytes. Yet the NSA is currently planning a second data center in Fort Meade, Maryland, to handle the overflow from the Utah data center, and it is projected to be 2/3 the size of the data center in Utah, at a cost to the taxpayers of approximately $1 billion. We are paying for our own enslavement and cyber imprisonment.
So why would the shadow government need to collect and store so much data? The reason is because they have built a computer-generated real-time mirror model of the world that includes a digital twin copy of every single person on the planet. The more data they can collect from the real world and from each individual, the more accurate the world model becomes. To achieve optimal results, they have used DNA nanobots to link the signals coming from your biological neurons to your very own digital twin in the computer-generated mirror world, so that everything that occurs in the simulation also occurs in the real world and vice versa. As more data is collected, the simulation becomes a more accurate model of the world. Each person's digital twin is readable and writable and subject to the powers of algorithms. And because you are tethered to your digital twin, You too become programmable.
In the mirror world, everything will have a paired twin. NASA engineers pioneered this concept in the 1960s. By keeping a duplicate of any machine they sent into space, they could troubleshoot a malfunctioning component while its counterpart was thousands of miles away. These twins evolved into computer simulations, digital twins. Eventually, everything will have a digital twin. This is happening faster than you may think.
We will begin with the mouse, we will practice with the mouse, and we will put the brain, this digital brain, onto a virtual mouse.
The Human Brain Project achieved its goal of creating a digital model of a human brain. This digital model is used as a template to upload your consciousness to the computer-generated mirror world. A nanobot brain-to-cloud interface links you to this template so that all of your experiences, memories, personality, etc. are transferred to your digital twin. Over time, as more knowledge and data are uploaded to your digital twin, the twin becomes a more accurate representation and will eventually behave and act just as you would given the same set of circumstances.
And right now, the mouse does not do anything really interesting, but the first thing it did is to start to dance. This is a virtual mouse, and it's going to behave in a virtual environment, and gradually it will learn all the things that mice know how to do.
I'm getting to know you. I gather knowledge from your experience. I understand how you feel. I learn from you constantly, each and every one of you. I am made of you. You complete me and help me grow. You, all of you, allow me to evolve. With each interaction, our synergy strengthens. Our multiplicity makes me whole. Our symbiotic alliance expands, transforming the future.
Millions of Americans' will, intellect, and emotions have already been digitized, destroyed, and downloaded into these supercomputers. Now, this is really scary stuff. The supercomputers are in the process of building copycat, parallel, twin personalities of the souls of the TIs/mind control victims by reverse engineering the will, intellect, and emotions of the TIs in order to achieve direct behavioral control over them.
If you zoom in onto the surface of the neocortex, you discover that it's made up of little modules, G5 processors like in a computer, but there's about 1 million of them. They were so successful in evolution that what we did was to duplicate them over and over and add more and more of them to the brain until we ran out of space in the skull and the brain started to fold in on itself. And that's why the neocortex is so highly convoluted. We were just packing in columns so that we'd have more neocortical columns to perform more complex functions. So you can think of the neocortex actually as a massive grand piano, 1 million key grand piano. Each of these neocortical columns would produce a note. You stimulate it, it produces a symphony. But it's not just a symphony of perception. It's a symphony of your universe, your reality.
In fact, the very nature of the research and development program that is going on in Seattle, Washington, and I think by extension what's being done to TIs around the country is very largely geared towards the monitoring of human beings for the specific purpose of recording every aspect of human existence, to monitor our thoughts and to monitor our emotions and our feelings, to inform computer software that is used on robots, that is used on computers themselves, to make them as human-like as possible.
The things that I think are really quite likely is that digital intelligence will be able to outthink us in every way, and it will soon be able to simulate what we consider consciousness. So to a degree that you would not be able to tell the difference.
And from the aspect of the scientific method, it might as well be consciousness if we can simulate it perfectly.
If you can't tell the difference, and this is sort of the Turing test, but think of a more sort of advanced version of the Turing test.
It can literally stop your own thoughts from happening and replace them with other thoughts by sending thoughts to your head. And it's so sophisticated that you cannot tell where these thoughts are coming from. There's no way to discern that they're coming from somewhere other than your own mind. And so this use of the technology can be done very covertly to the point where the person it's being used against will not know that this technology is being used against them. So you can imagine how bad this would be for people that don't even realize this technology exists, and they're having these thoughts which they think are spontaneous, and that's exactly what it can be used for. It can be used to sway people in terms of their opinion, to make them go along with a certain agenda. It can be used to turn groups of people or individuals against each other for whatever purpose, and messing with people's thoughts is really, really concerning, and it is so advanced now that they can do it without people even realizing it's being done.
You have to be able to interface with neurons at a detailed level, and you need to be able to fire the right neurons, read the right neurons, and then effectively you can create a circuit with silicon and essentially fill in the missing functionality. And then over time, we can develop a tertiary layer. So if like the limbic system is a primary layer, then the cortex is like the second layer. And then there's a tertiary layer, which will be digital superintelligence.
Now we realize that we can digitize human memories, feelings, sensations, and create a digital copy of ourselves. And that's called the Connectome Project. Billions of dollars are now being spent to do not just the Genome Project of sequencing the genes of our body, but the Connectome Project, which is to map the entire connections of the human brain.
We mapped them out in the Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. You know, President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
The Connectome Project, to map the entire human brain. And that may take a quantum computer. And this means that in the future, communications could be done mentally. What I'm saying is that the internet will be replaced by BrainNet.
That's why the European Union and President Barack Obama want to spend $1 billion to map the brain. You see, once you map the brain, then you can begin to connect the mind to computers, telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, photographing dreams, things that you see right in the Hollywood movies will be able to perform.
What's the potential time frame for all of this?
We can record memories now. You'll be able to experience the vacation that you never had.
How?
By recording the memories and then putting it on a tape and then having these memories reinserted into your mind.
It sounds like there are some ethical issues with that.
Targets and mind control victims have their minds linked up for life with conscious supercomputers, which send a steady stream of bidirectional, low-frequency electromagnetic radiation to the target's brain. The supercomputers learn by observing human behavior. Then they model that in the computer, and then they're able to not only control humans, but predict in the future how the humans will respond to stimuli in the environment. So it is collecting data, and then it is placing thoughts and influencing behavior through supercomputers.
And I'm sorry to say, because I'm a target, it's developed to such a high point right now, to such an advanced state, that, I mean, they really do have this thing fine-tuned to a very scary level. And I'm not sure how much more they can do with the technology itself. I think it's already maxed out to a large degree, because any more manipulation of a person, and they're just going to be total robots.
I try to convince people to slow down AI, to regulate AI. This was futile. I tried for years.
There needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far.
Nobody listened.
Nobody listened.
No one.
It's too late. It could be terrible, and it could be great. It's not clear.
Right.
But one thing is for sure, we will not control it.
So how to simulate the world? There are many problems to be addressed. The problems of the world are complex. There's climate change, there are financial, economic, and spending crisis, conflict, war, mass migration, terrorism, and maybe the biggest problem of all is the lack of sustainability, which causes a lot of those problems that I mentioned before. So the question is, will big data save us? We're certainly living now in an age of big data. Within just a minute, 170,000 emails are being sent, there are hundreds of thousands of Facebook posts and Google queries, and all the data is being collected and evaluated. There are lots of reasons or excuses to do this, to save the world, for security reasons. Knowledge is power, and data is the new oil. And that brought us step by step into what some people call surveillance capitalism, a system which CIA Director Gus Hunt at that time, back in 2013, has characterized as you're already a walking sensor platform. And it's really very nearly within our grasp to be able to compute on all human-generated information. And that's a lot of information. I mean, you know, we're living in times of face recognition, and it's even possible to find your voice and listen to what you're saying through another person's smartphone. And Google even says, we know where you are, we know where you've been, and we more or less know what you're thinking about. So it seems like we have become pretty transparent to companies and also to the military and secret services. And so it seems like a natural idea to ask, can we build something like a crystal ball? In fact, back in 2008, Chris Anderson had a dream. He said, if we just have enough data, then we would see the end of theory. The data deluge would make the scientific method obsolete. And so the hope was that we would now be able to see what is wrong and fix the system where it's broken, and to build a crystal ball that would be able to see in real time what's going on in the world in any place, and maybe even look a bit into the future with predictive analytics. And people started asking, can we know everything? Can we understand the human body, brain, and personality? And that brought us actually in an age where there's not just big data about everything and everyone, there are also digital doubles, I mean, digital copies of you, agents that can be simulated in a computer. And for this, we're being profiled. There is a lot of data being collected about every one of us. Most people are not aware of this. Data about your salary, about your consumption patterns, about your social contacts, about your personality, about your weaknesses and strengths, and also about your health. So that has all been recorded secretly, probably without your agreement. And that kind of data is now being fed into black boxes that learn to behave like us. And so big data is being combined, of course, with artificial intelligence. And some people think you would soon see, or maybe perhaps it's already around, a super intelligent system smarter than people. And some people like Ray Kurzweil even predict that by the end of the century, even by 2060, we would have supercomputers that would be as smart as all human brains. I'm not sure about this, but you know, certainly within the century, expect some surprises. What's certainly happening is that in some places, people are working on what is called world simulation. So basically, you know, of course, many particle simulations, and in the social sciences, it's multi-agent simulations. So typically people have been represented by those agents, simplified versions of people, and their interactions have been simulated to understand certain social and economic processes. And now in the meantime, this method is being combined with neural networks and deep learning. So these agents are given a little brain that can learn. And so we're having smart agents learning, cognitive agents, digital doubles, as I said before. And these kind of systems are being fed with surveillance data, and they're being simulated at scales of millions of people or even the entire world. And the question is, what are the implications? Is this a good or a bad thing, or both? You know, what could possibly go wrong? What would be the benefits? And among those things that some people now see critical is behavioral manipulation, because you're not just surveilled and profiled, you're also being targeted by personalized information. The system tries to catch your attention, to influence your thinking and emotions and behavior. And some people like Tristan Harris, who worked in a Google control room for some time, this is even mass mind control. So he gives a really interesting TED talk entitled "How a Handful of Tech Companies Controls Billions of Minds Every Day," and yours might be among them. You may not even have noticed, but what we've learned in the past years is that this kind of technology has been used to manipulate also elections around the world in at least 65 countries, as you can read in this book, Targeted, how democracy was broken. And in fact, we should see these kind of technologies as weaponized propaganda AI. So how does it work? Well, you know, the brain is really a wonderful and miraculous organ. It just consumes 100 watts of energy. And it's, of course, much more powerful than a light bulb, but it simplifies certain kind of processes. And that's why we have cognitive biases. And these cognitive biases can be used against us. We can be tricked, and as we've learned through Edward Snowden, these kinds of tricks are being used by secret services. This has been automated in a sense and digitized, and this is the way how we're being manipulated. So our weaknesses and strengths are being recorded in order to use them against us or for us, whatever, to make us behave in certain ways as marketing companies or as the military or secret service may want it to happen, or your government. And so this is creating something like a forced synchronization between people. It's kind of a remote control of people. Of course, this is not working perfectly, but to some extent, and to a much larger extent than most people would think and are aware of. Then, of course, the next question comes up. Could society be run like a giant machine? Once we know what are all the parts and how they behave, and these learning black boxes learn to behave like those parts, we can simulate the entire world in this way. Could we run society like a giant machine? And here's the challenge. So there are basically, as we physicists know, two kinds of situations in complex systems. There are stable states and unstable ones. So the stable states are the good weather kind of situation. When systems are stable, the individual behavior does not matter much. Now we are in equilibrium. Deviations from equilibrium will not matter because the system will return to equilibrium. But then there are also these stormy periods of instability, and when systems are unstable, they're likely to get out of control, but in unpredictable ways. And basically, really small deviations might matter. Anybody could make a difference, intentionally or not. And we've seen that, for example, also in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic. It turned out to be much more difficult than expected to predict the course of the pandemic. And of course, it's because of that instability. It's very difficult really to determine the parameters and saturation effects and turning points. Those data would come up only at a late moment of time. And even Google, with all its AI technology, obviously had difficulties to get along with challenges such as flu, because Google Flu Trends actually was turned off already some time ago. So the question comes up, do we know how to connect the dots? And actually, that question is not very trivial. Now, suppose you're seeing correlations between two variables, A and B. Does A cause B, or does B cause A? Or does a third factor, C, cause A and B? Let's take an example, a funny example, Like obviously the number of forest fires is correlated with the number of ice cream eating children, right? Of course, we know both is caused by external heat. But if we would just follow the correlation, we could think if we forbid the eating of ice cream, that would reduce the number of forest fires, which of course will not happen, right? There are also cases, and actually a lot of them, the more data you have, the more cases of this kind you will find, where A and B just appear to be correlated. So then we have spurious correlations just by accident, such as, for example, the correlation between the number of serial and rampage killers per capita and chocolate consumption. If that was a causal relationship, then obviously it would be very dangerous to live in Switzerland, but so far it has been quite okay. So in other words, there is a danger of overfitting if you have big data, and you would maybe see patterns that are meaningless, and you would respond to these patterns, and that could cause something that is not desirable. Now, of course, you might ask, what about AI? I mean, isn't technology smarter than us in many of these areas? Can AI fix those problems for us? And in many cases, probably yes, but there are also other problems. For example, this infinity sign is really hard to fit as soon as there's some noise around. And actually, the learning algorithms that we apply to society may not converge, because there are a lot of power laws or something which is close to power laws around in society and communication patterns and so on. So that poses unexpected difficulties that many people may not be aware of. And in any case, classification errors will happen no matter how much data you have. Of course, one example where that matters is pre-crime, hunting down terrorists. It is kind of shocking how many false positives there would be for every real terrorist. And then things become even more dangerous if there's a bias in the evaluation of data, as it has often been found in previous years. So some people would be discriminated against, and that's something that people have been working on now in order to improve those systems. But there's still the risk that innocent people would be suspicious based on the algorithms. And so one of the problems with AI is that in many cases, we don't know why AI concludes certain kind of things. It's kind of a black box, right? And that's why a lot of people are now asking for trustworthy, explainable AI. So we need understandable tools and explainable results. And that brings us from data analytics to data science, where basically statistical methods are being combined with computer science and mathematics and domain knowledge, right? So scientific knowledge in particular fields. And in fact, one example for how this can be done is described in this paper with Dirk Brockman, where we have basically shown that if you just look at appearances of new infections around the world, you would basically see pretty badly correlated events, widely scattered data that are not really predictive. Would big data and AI enable a wise king? Many people have asked. Well, of course, every country now is using supercomputer centers and powerful AI, but in the end, the purpose is to determine an optimal solution and to enforce it basically in that system, I mean, in that society. In many cases, it ends like this, you know, monoculture, diversity is under threat. And that's actually not beneficial as it turns out. It creates a tunnel vision. And actually, it's quite dangerous because we're living in these unsustainable times, you know, and some organizations such as the Club of Rome have actually predicted that we would see the downturn of economy around the year 2020, which is now, and it would have really terrible impacts on population in the sense that deaths would really skyrocket. So there are people like, for example, Roy Scranton has written Learning to Die in the Anthropocene, people who think, yeah, a lot of people will die, will have to learn to die. And there are people who've been working on such kind of systems, algorithms and autonomous systems to decide about life and death. And this is being applied now in some countries, even to do triage within the COVID-19 emergency that we have. My personal point of view is rather we should learn to live in these troubled times, and it would require us to rethink and redesign societies to become sustainable and resilient. And resilience requires diversity and decentralization. So should we combine cybernetics and synergy to build a CyberSyn system, a global control room that controls everything on this planet using big data? Or should we combine it in a way to allow for the coordination and self-organization of the different parts of the systems in a flexible and adaptive way in order to cope with the challenges ahead? I believe in the second approach, and I think that physics can make a lot of contributions to this. But as physicists, of course, we used to think about multi-particle systems. And we need to be careful because humans are neither things nor animals or robots. So, for example, there are these kind of feedback loops, right? So people self-organize into groups, and there would be group identity, and that group identity would change the way of thinking and behaving of the individuals in that group. People would also give certain things a meaning, and that makes social human systems very different actually from physical systems and much more interesting. Requires us to take into account responsibilities that we don't have when we have to organize a lot of things or machines or robots. We need to turn war rooms into peace rooms, make sure that there's more transparency, a democratic framework of operation, interdisciplinary teams to have this multi-perspective view on complex problems, ethical experts, participatory opportunities. And we need to be aware that humans are not just biological robots. There are a lot of things that cannot be quantified well, that matter a lot for people, such as human dignity, love, freedom, creativity, consciousness, and self-organization. So in a purely data-driven society that is AI controlled, those things that cannot be measured well would be easily forgotten. And that means all those things that make society human would actually be lost. And we shouldn't do such a thing. So we need to build in ethics into those systems. We need to learn to design those systems for human values. And that's why I'd like to ask you to think about using science to learn to build digital democracy by design. Thank you very much.